Welcome back. I'm glad to say that we're finally back with a new season of the Candid Frame. We're happy to return to producing the show and sharing, wonderful conversations with exceptional photographers, as has always been our mission since 2006. For those of you who don't know, my family and I lost our home in the Eaton fire in Southern California last January. So suffice it to say, the last several months have been a challenge, and saying that would be an understatement. But thankfully, with the kindness and support of family, friends, and supporters, including many of you, we've begun the slow process of reclaiming our lives. We're leasing a house in Pasadena, which provides much needed stability as we start the slow process of rebuilding our home. We can't thank you enough for your kindness and support over the last several months. I can't imagine how we would have done so much if it hadn't been for the outreach of so many people, some of whom I have never even met in person. So I can't thank you enough. This house's second bedroom is now my office/studio. And thanks to the many contributions of hundreds of individuals and organizations, including Fujifilm USA, B&H Photo, Think Tank Photo, and Los Angeles Center of Photography, the Huntington Library, and countless others, we're back. And I'm so glad that I can return to these conversations, because it's definitely going to be one of the things that's going to help keep me sane over the next couple of years. I reached out to my friend and fellow podcaster, Jeffery Saddoris, to help me run a test of my new setup, because I wanted to make sure that everything was working properly before I started, properly doing interviews. And it's, usually the case when I sit down with Jeffery, we got into a deep conversation, not only about the past several months that we've experienced here, but also about our mutual love for creativity, especially through photography. After listening to the recording, I thought it'd be a good way to start the year and get you up to date on where we are now. Now, after this episode, we will return to our standard format of conversations with photographers. And in the meantime, take a listen if you have a mind to. And thank you again for your patience and your kindness and support. This is Ibarionex, and this is The Candid Frame. Well, Jeffrey, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
As I mentioned, this may be go out into the ether. It may not. But now that I've finally set up in this space, I wanted to make sure I had a chance to kick the wheels on it before I actually have a real quote unquote guest on the show.
Thanks.
You're my friend, so I know that if this went into the tank, you'd be very forgiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate having to go back to a guest and say, we got to do it again.
Yeah. How many times has that happened?
Probably
in your
3.
9,000 episodes of The Candid Frame.
I think 3 or 4 times.
Has it really?
Yeah. It sucks eggs.
Have they been cool about it, or?
Yeah. I think for the most part, but regardless of, the best laid plans, you just, something can't happen. Everything looks like it's fine.
Yeah.
And you're not hearing if there's a problem, if there's like some sort of corruption of the audio, or the file didn't record. On the service that I've been using for a while, Squadcast, they're uploading as we're speaking to the cloud. So the idea is that even if we cut off, if I bring back the conversation, it will continue. Because your audio is going to be uploaded to theirs, my audio is going to be uploaded to the cloud, and it should be really clean, as opposed to when I used to do it on Skype. The signal could be kind of wonky and get kind of crispy, but now it's very very clean.
Yeah. Did you see that Microsoft just killed Skype finally?
Yeah.
After, what was it, 18 years, 14 years, something like that since they bought it?
Yeah, things are being killed everywhere you look.
Yeah.
It's very strange. But, in my early days of podcasting, Skype was one of the methods I
It
I did
was
interviews.
for years. Yeah. I mean, that was the first, I don't even know how many years of podcasting. That was the go-to, right?
Yeah, and trying to figure out, okay, how do you separate the tracks and all that, all that fun stuff.
Right.
Those are the days when no one knew exactly what they were doing, and everyone was like trying to figure out something. And they would say, "Hey, try this," and go, "Try it." And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't.
Right.
But that was part of the adventure. People now who create podcasts have it relatively easy.
Oh my God, the
in terms of
tools that are
starting
available
something.
now. Yeah. And like you're using Squadcast, right? Mm-hmm. And so there, Squadcast and Descript merged. So now you get transcription and, AI voice fixing if you need to punch in something. And I mean, it's kind of amazing how good the tools have gotten.
And I've been recording the video for quite a while now, but because I don't have the resources to sit down and edit these to put them out on YouTube, it's strictly just been audio and just provides me a way of interacting with someone face to face as I'm talking to them, which
it's different,
a lot of guests
isn't it?
prefer.
Yeah, I think you get. I only have done a couple where I can see who I'm talking to, but on those few occasions, I feel like it's been a different kind of conversation because you can see that person's expression and body language, and I think the conversations tend to have a little more room to breathe because you can read those cues.
Yeah.
And I think moving forward, it's something I would absolutely like to do in the way you're doing it here.
Yeah. Yeah. I was an early adopter of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been pretty pleased with the service. I've only had a couple of hiccups with it, but their customer service has always been spot on. I know there's some other alternatives there, but for the way that I use it, I've been really happy with it. I know that Descript bought them out, so I don't know what difference that's going to make in terms of the back end. We'll have to see. I put my subscription to the service on hold in January because I wasn't producing any shows, and I just reactivated it today. And thankfully I didn't have to relearn it. It's pretty straightforward in terms of how to use it. Now it's just making sure it's, that everything is in its proper place.
So when I've never used Squadcast or Descript when they were standalone services. When you hit stop, what happens to those audio files? Do you have to go retrieve them from the server, or are they automatically downloaded to you after the recording stops? How does that work?
Yeah, they exist on the cloud, and then I can download them, or in this case, my editor will just go there and he'll download them rather than me having to take the files. The only thing I need to record and send to him directly is my intro and outro, or any ad read that I'm doing.
Right.
And that's
do you, for the ad reads, are they dynamic? Can you punch in like a mid-roll or pre-roll, post-roll, that kind of thing? Or do you have to insert them where you want them in the show?
He cuts them in.
Yeah.
Usually a midpoint. So he kind of knows. He has an ear for the show. He was a fan of the show, Martin, and he's offered to edit it. He does video and audio stuff up north in Northern California, and I welcomed the helm because I was
no kidding.
I didn't know that much. I knew enough to make me dangerous, and certainly demonstrated that in those early episodes. So having someone, who knew how to sweeten audio and produce a more clean output, I was very grateful for.
And in probably a fraction of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been playing with Resolve, and I'm an idiot. I'm painfully slow. It takes forever for me to do anything. And I know that in the hands of somebody, like your editor or somebody who knows Resolve or even Final Cut Pro or whatever, the simple things that I'm doing, they could fly through it. But me, I'm having to look up, well, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And then watch a tutorial or look for the right tutorial, watch that, and then try to implement it as best I can.
Yeah, in terms of like these video files, I think the only way I could do it is hire someone to do it.
Yeah.
To put it together. And That's not been a big priority for me. I know that if I put it on YouTube, the opportunity to open the show up to another audience is there, because people use YouTube as a sort of big search engine nowadays.
Right.
But yeah, I'm holding off on that.
Yeah, there's still something
especially
magic.
now, I got enough on my on my plate, much less trying to sort of reformulate the show in the midst of all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah. And like I said, I still think there's something magic about audio. There is something I find much more compelling about listening to a conversation than I do, by and large, watching a conversation. And it's strange, because I like watching the conversation like what we're doing now while we're having the conversation, but I would prefer to just listen to other people have a conversation instead of watching them, for whatever reason.
Yeah, because I would be, because I've watched those, those conversations that they've had on some of those video podcasts, but a lot of those are very high production. It's like a 3-camera setup, wide, over the shoulder, and it's, that's the way it can be done. But there are other people who are just recording this, right? And it's just 2 talking heads on the screen. And the question is, how is it worth it to put the extra effort and the expense into putting out the video content? What are you expecting in terms of return? Right. And I know that in terms of, one of the things I've always sort of gravitated about becoming, a big presence on YouTube is just the fact that you're such a slave to the algorithm. We both know plenty of people who started YouTube channels about photography or practically anything else with an idea of what they wanted their show to be. And over time, it's evolved into something completely different, because as they became more reliant on that, on YouTube for their income, they were forced to change the content to cater to the audience's interest. That's why so many of the YouTube channels out there have been largely about gear reviews, because those are the numbers that go up. You start talking about what we talk about, at least what I talk about on this show, and what you've talked about on your podcast. It's much less of an audience for that. Yeah,
and for whatever reason, the craft and the art seems to be the casualty, and gets sort of left by the wayside. You're right, in favor of gear. Yeah. And I guess I understand it from the standpoint of photography is kind of unique in that it's sort of the art and the science of making image. Because I know I don't see a lot of painters talking about brushes, or palette knives, or photography is unique in that respect, where the tools get such an undue amount of attention when they're the least important to the process. I would argue that anyway.
And I think you've probably recognized from the podcast that you did in years with Bill, that audience, though they were interested in tech to some degree, they were really fascinated by the discussions about what it means to be a creative. And that's always what I've had in mind in terms of the show, is like, why and how do people do this thing, especially over decades? How have they made that happen? And I because in my early years as a photographer, I was just so singularly minded, thinking there was just one path to do this thing. And if you weren't able to follow that path, you might as well become a security guard. Right?
When did it change for you? When did it change for you? When did you realize that there were branches to that path?
Oh, I just put in my application for security guard. No, I think it's only been in the last decade.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Because I still think in my forefront of my mind, I was thinking that, if I want to be a quote unquote a photographer, that I need to be working, commercially or editorially or something along those lines, and And, that just wasn't happening for me for a variety of different reasons. So it was hard to sort of let go of that hard definition of what being a photographer was, and diminishing the value of what I had created for myself in terms of.
That's shocking to me, because you would even, let's go back 10 years, even going back 10 years, what was that episode number? 10 years ago, you had still talked to dozens, if not hundreds by that point, of photographers, all of whom I would imagine have different paths, but yet for you, there was still just the one. Yeah,
I think I was just still holding on to that I should be this, I should be doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And then, anyway, as much as I enjoyed doing what I was doing, writing books and, writing magazine articles, doing the podcast, and being, really embraced by the photo community at large, it was that imposter syndrome thing that I was feeling. No less so now.
Yeah.
Right. But it was that, what are you working on question that you always get posed to as a photographer. And sometimes it was, it wasn't anything substantive, at least to my mind's thinking. I'm working on this project, documenting this community, so on and forth. I'm going to put together a book, or going to do an exhibit, or, because I'm talking to photographers all the time who are doing these things.
Right.
So part of me, I think, was thinking that, I'm not doing that, and somehow that this was less valid. And, that was just me.
Wait, go back to that for a second. What you were doing was less valid because you didn't have something concrete to show for it in the same way?
I think I'd always imagined that this is what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that I wasn't doing that made me undervalue what I was doing. Part of it is like, how seriously can you take something that you love doing so much? And I'm not bringing a whole bunch of income in, because it was tied to that,
Yeah. Well,
was the fact that, hey, I'm still, yes, I'm making a living as a photographer doing other things.
Yeah. Everything
right? But
right.
I'm not exclusively, doing a podcast and producing photographic work that is bringing me an income that allows me to support myself completely without having to do these other things. And I think that the fact that wasn't manifesting itself, that led me to pass judgment on it.
Yeah.
But, the last few months, the outreach by so many people that have helped, in so many different ways, but particularly financially, made me realize what I had built over the last, so many years since, 2006, since I first started the show.
Right.
Because it was people who listened to the show who were coming out of the woodwork. And supporting us in a whole myriad of different ways. And then it clicked, oh, wow, this is what I've built. And this means a hell of a lot more than any dollar amount I could have earned, as a photographer. So it kind of like laid waste to that idea of, oh, this isn't what it should have been. It's exactly what it needed to be.
Yeah. Wasn't there a point for you too that I think I remember us talking about it, where the joy that you got from it and still get from it really was, it put the financial side in the back seats. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but kind of once and for all, that this is the joy that I get from this pursuit and this community is more valuable to me than what I could possibly make from it. There was a realization that I remember talking with you about.
I think, because at some point I realized, hey, I'm not going to be making much money out of this.
Yeah.
But it fulfills me in a way that few other things do.
Yeah.
So even if the money never comes through, I'll still be doing this. Luckily, the few people who have supported it financially just help me not have to dig into my pocket every month, to pay for all the things I need to pay for in order to keep this thing happening. So But I always
do
wanted.
You think when you made that ask, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you think when you made that ask and when this happened, do you think people were made more aware of what it actually cost over the years to maintain the show that you've built and all the time that it takes to write the books, the effort that it takes to research, like all of the sort of financial stuff that you've put in? Are people, I tend to believe that people are largely unaware, that an audience that's outside of kind of what we're doing is largely unaware of the real world costs that go into producing and maintaining it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is. But I think that's the case, with any sort of creative effort. They see sort of the end result. And unless it's going to spelled out, I don't think a lot of people kind of understand that in the back, it's a lot of time and effort and money that goes into sort of making it happen. And also I've never been a great pitchman, Yeah. So it's like, okay,
birds of a feather on that one.
I got these presets. I've got these books. I've got this,
Even when there's a new episode, you want to promote it, but not too much. You don't want to make it obvious.
And part of it is just bandwidth. It's just like, I don't have, the time and the effort to really be out there and just promoting the heck out of it. Yeah. I mean, I do the stuff that I do on X or Facebook and, now on Substack. But I have other things that I needed to do. And especially now, facing 2 years rebuilding a house, even less so, right? But, the last going on 3 months of not producing the show, I really need it. It's going to help maintain my sanity, right? Because these moments are just a wonderful departure where I get to talk about people about something that I love a lot. And I don't have to be thinking about, dealing with an insurance company or an architect or a contractor or the county or, whatever else gets thrown my way. Yeah. And the endless calls of people asking me, do you want to sell your property? Because unfortunately,
ambulance chasers.
Because there are some important calls that have to come in. I've not been able to apply the block feature on my phone, which I did in the past. Right. Now I have to accept, any call that's coming in because it could be an important call. It could be from FEMA. It could be from the SBA. It could be, and unfortunately, I get the first person who called me, I think, was in 2 or 3 days after the fire, asking if I wanted to sell my property.
Wow.
And usually I just kind of hang up and all I said is, there's a particular place in hell for people like you.
Yeah.
And then I hung up.
Yeah.
But that was the extent.
My property hasn't even cooled yet, and you're already on me about this.
Yeah. But at least 5 calls a week.
Wow.
And those are the ones that I just, when I see, it will tell you like spam or that sort of call. I get those like, I don't know how many times a day, and how many of those are related to, the property. God knows.
Yeah.
But you always had to be vigilant, but especially now, because the trolls are out in force to take advantage. There's one woman we met while we were at the hotel, and she went out to see her property, not too far from where we live. And a fellow came up to her and, asked if she lived in the area, and she said yes. And he tried to pitch her
right there on the spot.
We could get you money quickly split, and she was just like, "Man, it'd been days. This woman was in grief and shock and mourning, and here comes this person. You want to sell it?" The situation is that some people don't have a choice. They don't have the means to rebuild. They don't have the means to be able to pay rent somewhere else while they're rebuilding,
and pay your mortgage on top of that.
Yeah, we're facing that, but thankfully we have the means to be able to do that. It's not ideal. but, Cynthia's been very good in terms of managing the finances for the last, 15, 20 years. She took over from me and she's done a much better job than I ever did.
Yeah.
Right. But that being said, when you start facing how much everything is going to be, man.
Well, and like we were talking before, how much it was at the going rate, let alone now the post-fire rate.
Yeah.
Which is going to be, who knows how much more expensive, 20%, 30%, 50%? Who knows?
Yeah. I was talking to someone at work, and her family had a modest home in the Palisades, and they hired an architect, and he was quoting over $1,000 per square foot.
The architect?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've been looking and researching and sort of, eyeballing somewhere between $500 maybe to $700 per square foot. Just trying to get my head around what's possible.
Right.
Trying to figure it out, because there really is no, definitive statement in terms of how much rebuilding is. There's a lot of sort of guesstimating, but it really is sort of unknown until building actually begins. When people start actively starting to build, then you'll start getting a sense of, well, how much are materials? How accessible are they? What's happening with the labor force that's going to be building it, not just in Altadena, but also in the Palisades?
Yeah.
And God forbid somewhere else in California is impacted by some sort of disaster where all of a sudden, they're demanding the very same things.
Do you have any sense of how material requirements may have been impacted or changed in terms of what kinds of materials you have to use to build moving forward? Are there any fire retardant or fire preventative materials that are now mandated in that area, or are you somehow grandfathered in and can use whatever you want?
Yeah, in Los Angeles County, they've sort of waived a lot of the standards that you had to meet for new construction in order to sort of expedite building. But of course, people would like to be able to make their homes more fire resistant. But again, it's a matter of cost.
Yeah.
Because there are houses that are more modular design houses where they're pre-constructed and then put together on site, and then there's more traditional construction, and we're looking into both, right? It's not that modular construction is really less expensive. It's just a different way of building a house. But either way, the features and add-ons, they all cost something. Yeah, whether it's the type of windows that you get, the roof that you get, whether you're getting stucco on the house, all those things kind of add up. And the question is, well, how much money do you have to spend, and how much of a buffer you want to build in for yourself? Because anybody who's ever done a remodel or even a build on a house knows that, the price that they get quoted at the beginning is never the amount
never
that they pay at the very end. There's always something coming up. So we have to sort of have a budget that allows for a certain latitude for those unexpected expenses. And having never done this, we did a kitchen remodel. We did things like that. But that was, cakewalk compared to
by comparison,
building an entire house.
Is there any, and I'm going to butcher the reference, but is there any sort of, a lot of these communities were older communities in terms of look and feel, and they were multi-generational homes. Is there any sort of conversation with municipalities or the city historical preservation societies in terms of building to a similar aesthetic of what was lost, or is it the Wild West?
It's kind of both. There are certain communities. There's a certain area called St. James houses, and those were houses that had got a triangular roof, kind of a high peak roof, and St. James Village. And I think it was about a month ago that the people in that community were trying to work together to maintain the style for the houses that were being constructed. So I think collectively they were trying to go in together to, ensure that the style is maintained, but also working with a similar contractor to help maintain or reduce.
So there's
the overall
consistency
cost.
across.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
And there's also another entity that is trying to go using the old Sears model, because you could buy a house through Sears.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of
the
homes that are built in Altadena were those catalog houses.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea is to use that as the model.
Wow.
For people collectively to band together to rebuild their homes. Again, for uniformity of like style, but also to help reduce the overall cost of rebuilding.
Right.
Because if everyone is building a very similar, not cookie cutter. I mean, it's not exactly the same.
Yeah,
house.
sure. It's not a subdivision,
Right.
Yeah,
but if
in
it's the same
Irvine
sort
or
of
something.
sensibility and so on and so forth, then it becomes feasible that it's less expensive. But if everybody's going out to do the same thing, do their own thing, God only knows.
Yeah.
Do
you have a more? I haven't looked in a while. Do you have a more accurate count of how many homes were lost overall?
No. I was initially, but with all the things we needed to do, it's been hard to sort of keep up with everything.
Yeah.
Because we were first in a hotel for a month, and then we got into the Airbnb, and then it was, doing all the stuff with FEMA, then looking into the SBA business and then the home loans, a variety of different resources that we had to tap into both at my job. And, it was like this crash course of all these things that we needed to do, and everything seemed that it needed to be done yesterday.
Yeah.
So there was
and with the current administration, is that stuff changing kind of daily, weekly, or
I don't know.
Do you have any solid ground?
It's too early to tell.
Yeah.
There's a lot of concern about, the policies, and especially with the tariffs against wood and steel and, all those things. But I think it's too early to tell. I think within probably in the next 4 to 6 months is when we'll have a sense of the impact it's going to have on the rebuilding effort. Right now, I think it's just too early to be, which is disconcerting, but it's like my attitude is it's out of my control. I can't worry about it. I just have to focus right now on what do I need to do now. And for the last 2 weeks, it was moving into this place. And that's all I was figuring out. It's like, we got a place now. Now we need a bed. Now we need a couch. Now we need blah, blah, all those things that you never really thought about when you're already in a place.
Yeah. Now you have to think about them.
We need towels. We need floor mat. We need, all these small little things.
Are you still able to carve out a little creative time for yourself, daily, weekly, to just reset and recenter? Or has that had to be put on hold for a while?
Pretty much on hold. The only thing I'm doing right now is during my breaks at the Huntington, I take a walk in the garden for 20 minutes and I make pictures. So I have a lot of pictures of my walks in the desert garden or the Japanese garden, Chinese garden. That's been the only sort of regular photography that I've been doing, which I'm thankful. For that. Because I had just finished teaching a workshop in Japan in December, and I was just all on fire after that. And then the fire hit, and then it was like, whoa, I'm thinking about what the project is I'm going to do on Altadena. I'm not really sure what that's going to shake out. I had several different ideas. Now that we're settled into the house, I think I can start finding the time of sort of putting it together. I made some initial pictures in the fire zone first couple of weeks, but I think it's been a month since I've been up there now. Because while I am making those pictures when I can, I know that whatever project I'm going to do is not about the disaster.
Right.
Because for me, that's not my experience of the town. That's not why I loved living there. Right. So I think there are plenty of people out there making those pictures already. Right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I kind of stopped on posting on Instagram. I did some initial posts, but at some point I just didn't feel comfortable continuing to put those images out there. Yeah, I got a couple ideas, none of which I want to really kind of discuss at this point because they're just they're just ideas.
Yeah,
but I feel like I got the luxury of time.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
to kind of figure out what it is, and I'm probably going to play with a couple of. I think I'm going to experiment with a couple of types of imagery, and then
that's something I wanted to kind of touch on is beyond the project that you've been thinking about. How has all of this affected where you see your photography going in sort of a larger trajectory? Has it changed it at all, or is this something that you have to get through so you can get back to the trajectory that you were on pre-fire?
I think it reinforced how important it is to me. You know, yesterday my mother was in the hospital the last 2 or 3 days, and which was, you know, she's 88. Things happen, UTI, so on and so forth. She she was in the hospital because she was having some breathing issues, and she was fine. The big pain in the ass was dealing with the hospital, which, remarkable enough, you can be in hospital for 2 or 3 days and never speak to a doctor. How that's even freaking possible, I did not think it was possible until this weekend.
Is it just nurses and admin staff?
Yes.
Or
yeah, I mean, I didn't want to get into it. My blood pressure would just go up. But I didn't think it was possible.
Happy place.
But let me tell you, it is very much possible.
It is possible.
It is possible. But anyway, you know, while I was there, I made some photographs, you know, with me and my mom in the hospital room. And my mom has dementia, so she doesn't talk at this point. She isn't able to have a conversation at all. And I was just making pictures within the space, right? These are pictures I'm not going to share with anybody, but I was just, you know, I needed to do something. And, you know, I was enjoying the process of seeing, because I saw myself making pictures that demonstrated growth on my part in the ways I was seeing and examining the room. And it was a small room, probably one of the smallest hospital rooms I've ever seen. But it was still interesting about exercising my seeing and examining, well, what can I do something here that's interesting, right? And
not just sort of low-hanging fruit, obvious.
Right. Yeah. Because one of the things I did realize after the fire is that project that I did on my mother-in-law for 3 years, right, where we were taking care of her, all of a sudden those images have a greater significance because it's our house.
Sure.
You know? And I made photographs unintentionally documenting a house that's no longer there, right? So when I was in that hospital room, it was kind of like the same thing.
The things that are in that house, not just the house itself.
Oh, yeah.
Those objects, those memories, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So there are layers upon layers of what you were able to document.
So that thing was really sort of fresh in my mind when I was in the hospital room. It's like, here I am in a space that I'll probably never return to, and don't like the circumstances, but I'm a photographer. Let me photograph this. Yeah. You know, because, you know, this is part of my journey with my mother right now, going to hospitals as she, you know, she lays.
Was there any reluctance to document that at all, or did you feel comfortable from the start?
No, there's always a little bit of reluctance in there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. Yeah. It's not like I can ask my mom for her permission to do this, right? And how I feel she's okay with it, which is one of the reasons I'm unlikely to ever share these pictures. I may share some, but none that would include anything that would identify her, right? But those pictures primarily exist, you know. For me, with Faithy, you know, there was an understanding. You know, I'm making these pictures because she was conscious. She was,
yeah.
But with my mom, that's no longer the case. But seeing the pictures with Faithy makes me realize that this moment in not only my life with her, but my brother's life with her is really important, right? It sucks that it's documentation of a decline. But nevertheless, the care and the love that we're demonstrating for our mother throughout this entire process is really, it's important to document. And even if these images
you are documenting love. You are documenting
exactly
compassion.
What it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that is the greatest growth for me as a photographer, recognizing that all the stuff that I did practicing on the street, that sensibility in terms of how I see light and composition and all those things, I'm applying in a real personal way to the work that I'm doing. Because I'm still thinking the same way that I do whether I'm walking downtown Los Angeles or in Tokyo. Right?
Yeah.
But now there's a much more personal investment to the imagery. And I think that as a photographer, that's what I want to be doing more of. So I know whatever project this is that I do with focusing on the aftermath of the fires, that has to be part and parcel of it. But exactly what that's going to look like, I'm not really clear yet.
It's more of an empathetic lens, not a documentational or documentary.
Yeah, it's kind of like it has to be a mishmash of both.
Yeah.
And and that's something I've been gravitating to when it comes to the guests of the show for the last 1 or 2 years. It's about work that I feel is in that zone, that it's more than it's just about making amazing photographs. Mm-hmm. That there's something that's driving these people to tell these stories and to make these images, and recognizing the real inherent power of what photograph can and should be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And because I need to hear that.
Yeah.
And the show has always been about what does Ibarionex need to hear? Right? That's the only way I've been able to sort of, figure anything out in terms of the format of the show. It's like, I want to understand this. I want to hear this. Right. And that's why I'm, reaching out.
But you're willing to let that change. You're willing to let the answer to that, what does Ibarionex need to hear? You're willing to let that evolve.
Oh, yeah. And it always is. Yeah. Oh, it's changed from the first time I fired up the mic.
Yeah.
Right? Because as I've gotten older and as I've changed, not only as a photographer, but as a person, those things shift. Those things change. The values change. Right? So when I sit down and want to talk to somebody, I know what I want from the conversation. And sometimes it has less to do with photography and more about the connection. Mm-hmm. Did we vibe with each other? Did we have a good time hanging out with each other? For me, that's the best, right? And
do you see a point where you've heard all you need to hear from photographers and photography, and the tone of the show shifts away from photography, but you still need to have those questions answered somewhere else?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like only 10% of our conversation is about photography. I may be wrong, because sometimes I'll hear something and then I'll just go off on a tangent and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's all, I think, and people who listen to the show will know better than me, because I don't listen to my own episodes, to get a sense of what the hell I'm doing. But if it's a question about how images is created, I'm much less interested in the mechanics of how it was lit and what lens they used, but how did they just make it happen, and what were the obstacles in their path to making that happen? I want to understand that, right? Because every individual photograph or photographic project is just a series of challenges that a photographer has to surmount and figure out. And everyone does it differently, right? Even when you have ready access to your subject matter. Like Ellen Carucci, you familiar with her? She's a woman who does, you know her work. She's a photographer who's been photographing herself and her family for 30, 40 years. She's an amazing photographer, but like Sally Mann, it's been her world that she has photographed. And those images are beautiful, vulnerable, unnerving, striking, all at the same time, right? But it's her life that she's using as fodder for all these images. And it's just really fascinating in terms of the ability to be able to see yourself, see your family, see the dynamics that exist within them, and to make images that have such impact.
Yeah.
to people who don't know you, who don't know your family, who may be completely different from you culturally. And yet these images have not just a universality to them, but there's a poignancy and I think a vulnerability that exists in those images. And I like seeing that because that's not an easy thing to do because most photographs are not vulnerable.
Right.
Even if you're not making a picture of yourself, there's something about a picture that has a beautiful flaw to it. And it's not just a technical flaw, but
right.
there's a leaning away from the need for perfection, and there's a need for just genuineness in the image. I was looking at a photograph of a friend of mine yesterday, or day before yesterday, and it's this image of the spontaneous moment, I think in Santa Monica or Venice, of a little affair where a bunch of people had their dogs. I want to say it was pugs, but it wasn't. Something. It was one particular breed of dog that everyone was celebrating.
And it was all the same kind of dog.
Yeah. But she has this image where they were blowing bubbles and stuff like that. And she had a daughter in the foreground. And I think it was shot with a 28 millimeter, but she was very tight. And there was just a whole lot of stuff happening in the image. And what I loved about the image is it was so full of life. You looked at that picture and it was alive. And I just kept looking at it. And I love that picture. And man, when a picture has life in it, and it doesn't have to be full of people. It just has to have life in it. And I love that. I love seeing that in people's work. I love talking to people who can produce work like that.
Yeah.
Whether they're doing still lifes, whether they're doing documentary work. When I see it, I know it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the impetus for me to, send an email and say, I'd like to talk to you.
Yeah. I wonder, I've asked a lot of people, a lot of photographers, what's the difference between a good photograph and a great photograph? And I think somewhere in there, what you just said has to be some version of a great photograph allows you to ignore any technical hiccups or imperfections that may occur because it's otherwise so compelling for whatever reason.
Yeah. Because some of the most classic, legendary photographs are technically flawed in one way or another.
Out of focus, poorly composed.
But there's something about them that just sings. It makes them valuable, not just monetarily, but makes them valuable in terms of just an experience when you're taking a look at those photographs.
Yeah.
And you just look at it and you just go, it's like a painting. I've had a couple of times where I'm visiting a museum and I'll see a painting and I just stop and I'm just taken away.
Yeah.
What is it about the painting? I don't know anything about the technical things about the material, the brushes, whether it's oils or acrylics or any of those things. But I experienced that painting and all of a sudden I'm just moved. Do I understand why it is? No, I couldn't. I could tell you aspects of it that I like.
Yeah.
But why is it touching my heart? Why is it stopping me in my tracks rather than me sort of just walking past it as with, the other hundreds or thousands of paintings that are on exhibit in that museum? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know what I feel like when I see it. And so, I like people and sometimes it's just one particular photograph that I see of theirs that makes me feel that way. And it's just like, it's not that the other body of work that they have is lesser, but, if there's a photographer that's capable of doing that with one image but they produced a body of work, I'm interested in talking to them because I kind of want to understand.
Right.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
With so many people out there.
What were you thinking? Were you thinking? Or did you feel your way through this? How did this happen? Yeah. Yeah.
And there's never a single answer to it.
Yeah.
Some people are get into a space where that intuitive, playful, childlike essence is present with a technical awareness, right? And they're able to gel them flawlessly together. They don't compartmentalize the thing. Somehow there's a synergy that happens between the two sides. Sebastião Salgado, perfect example, right? If you take a look at his images technically, compositionally, light, contrast, you see a mastery of all things technical, right? But his images are not empty.
Yeah.
Right? You look at those
It's
pictures.
not just composition.
Jesus, right.
Yeah. It's not just...
Yeah. But images is so essential for those images, for those photographs to work as well as they do, but it's not just the composition, right? There's something else that's happening when he raises the camera and he's photographing those gold miners, coming out of that huge, massive pit, right? And you look at those pictures and there's just like you're dumbstruck, right, by what you're seeing. And it's not just that it's an exotic situation. Yes, it is very exotic. Most of us will never see that scene. But you look at those pictures and something happens to you, especially when you're seeing a print up on a wall. Yeah. If you've never seen a Salgado print, a big print on a wall on an exhibit, man, you are missing out. Because as beautiful as the books are, those prints do something to you. And he's just one of many examples of photographers who are capable of doing that. And I aspire to sort of, in myself, be able to tap into some of that.
Yeah.
So that my work...
Do you want to know what that is? Because you said you were doing the show because there are answers to questions that you want. But do you want Salgado to be able to speak concisely, clearly, coherently about that? Or do you want it to be something moved through me? I was there. Yeah. I was present, certainly, but it was something greater than me helping out a little.
Yeah. My question
is that more satisfying?
No, I don't want to hear, because I'm sure that he would not be able to explain it in a way that would be anything to me as far as me sort of absorbing it and processing it for myself. My question to him is, like, when you were witnessing that scene, what were you feeling? Beyond, the decision to use a particular lens and particular aperture, when you're surrounded by such immensity of humanity, such suffering, as a photographer in that moment, you're there to do a job. But what are you, as a human being, what are you feeling as you are witnessing this and making the pictures? That's what my question would be to him. Because I think that would be a much more interesting answer than anything else. Because, most photographers are not going to be faced with such calamity, right? Yeah. I mean, I look at the pictures at the fire and some amazing photographs, that the photographers who I know personally have made.
There was one particular photographer, and I reshared, and I don't remember his name, but there was one photograph where it was a fireman carrying a hose and backlit with just what looked like hell. And it was just in silhouette. And he produced a number of really just incredible photographs from very close up, not, and I don't remember his name, but phenomenal portraits of, and when I say portrait, I don't mean, face on portrait, but just representations of what was going on, of the devastation. It communicated what we at a distance could barely fathom.
Right. Yeah. And I think those images, though different than the ones I just sort of described, are incredibly valuable because there's, a wicked beauty to them.
Yeah.
Right. There's storytelling, and they're documenting an incredible, painful devastating experience for thousands of people. But they do it in a way that is just gets across, as best as can be possible in a photograph, what's going on. And let me tell you, until you're standing in the middle of that, you have no idea. Driving into the neighborhood after the fire, and seeing, all the landmarks, all the homes, all the businesses that you drove by tens of thousands of times, and seeing them completely leveled, is surreal. It's surreal.
Well, I think I think it was the day when I called you. It was the day that you had it was that morning that you had just seen your home. And I've never heard you at a loss for words. And that was you could hear it. You just couldn't process it. There was nothing there other than shock, disbelief, all of those things, but you couldn't put it to words what you were feeling in the moment. No,
because it was just like, oh, it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a good degree of shock, but I always have a delayed reaction to trauma. That's just the way I've always been. When my dad passed away, I cried, fell on the floor. But, but the impact of his loss came unexpectedly one day. I think it was months later. I was just in the living room, and it was like someone gut punched me. And I fell to my knees, and I was one of those slobby, snot coming out of your mouth, barely able to catch your breath.
Yeah.
And I was there for probably 5-10 minutes. Seemed like forever, where I just feel like I'd just been opened up. And I don't know what triggered it. It wasn't like looking at a picture or hearing something. All of a sudden, it was like, wham.
Wow.
And in terms of the house, I haven't had that yet. I think I came close last month when I was photographing. The Red Cross was there, and they were like dispersing things. No, it was at another time. I was back at the property, and I was just looking at it. And I think they had just done phase 1, where they take any sort of toxic,
which is what?
Toxics things like lithium batteries
just
from
removing,
cars, and things like that. And I'm just looking at it, and it was like, oh. And I felt a little there. My wife, on the other hand, is, her emotions have been completely out there. But I think part of it is the fact that I feel like, I think part of my head is like, I don't have time for that right now.
Yeah.
Even
in the way you just described it, are you aware that you didn't say when I went to my house, when I went home? You said when I went to the property.
Oh, did I?
There's a distance there that you're not even aware of it?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
No, but that kind of makes sense, because my home's not there anymore.
Right. You have to depersonalize it in some way, don't you?
Yeah. The thing that really sucked, and the one thing that did break me has nothing to do with the house. I'd been working on losing weight before the disaster happened. So I'd lost like 10, 12 pounds, something like that. So disaster happens, right? So my appetite just goes down. So I lost 10 pounds, at least, because I haven't been on a scale. But the clothing I left with, one pair of pants, a pair of tennis shoes, a shirt, and a jacket. That was my entire wardrobe.
Right.
So, we go to Target, people give donations, we get clothes. A month later, I can't fit into those clothes. Right? No. I had to donate the pants, the shirts, because everything was just like But one of the things that happened is that my fingers had gotten thinner, and my dad's ring.
Oh, no.
2 weeks ago, it fell off my hand, and I hadn't noticed it. And I was gotten at work, and I was always fidgeting with it. And I was at my desk, and I was going to fidget with it, and it was like, fuck. And
did you find it?
No.
Please tell me you found it.
No, I didn't find it.
You didn't find it?
No. And that loss, what I felt emotionally, that loss felt worse than the house. Because I had only kept 3 things from my dad. One was a pair of slippers, a walking stick, and that ring. And the first 2 I lost in the fire.
All of them are gone.
And then that ring just slipped off my fingers. And I just got it adjusted with a little thing to tighten it because my fingers, the initial 10 pounds I had lost, so I'd got it so that it was secure. But since then, I had lost another 10 pounds. You know, because my appetite is not what just what it was. I'm just not eating as much as I was. So when I realized it was gone, I backtracked every kind of way. And that hurt so bad.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and it's not a valuable ring monetarily.
Not the point.
But it meant,
not the point.
It was the one thing that had me connected. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad that I wore this when I left the house because I'm always having it. I'm glad I didn't lose that. I lost the other things, but I have that. And a month later to lose it. That, I know it may sound crazy. It sounds crazy to me. It's like the loss of that ring hurt me more than losing the house.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, the house can be replaced.
100%.
I can rebuild the house. I can put stuff back in there. But that ring, which was on my father's finger when he passed away, and is one of the last photographs I made of him before he left the Dominican Republic where he passed away of a heart attack. The last image, he was in his bedroom watching television, and I made a picture of his hands, and he's wearing that ring. He had 2 rings. One went to my brother, and the other one went to me. And it was just like, there was no consoling me.
No.
That day. I mean, I was at work like a half an hour and I left. And I backtracked everywhere I could looking for it, hoping that, it slipped somewhere in the house because we were moving from the Airbnb to here. And the only thing I can think of is when we were washing like the linen and all that other stuff at the house, and I was doing it at a laundromat, and I was moving things in and out of the dryers.
So it could have been at the laundromat. Yeah,
and I asked if anyone had found anything, but the likelihood, if someone had found it, they just took it. So, is there a possibility that I might find it? I would be as happy as anything.
Yeah,
but
it's under the seat in the car or something.
Something. It was just like, that fucking hurt. Excuse my language. That hurt. And I think that there were a lot of good things that have come out of losing the house. I think surprisingly, I feel better about myself as a man just because of how I've just showed up, for myself, for my family. How I'm not letting my fears and my insecurities sort of get the better of me. And it's just like, I feel this way. I feel self-doubt, feel insecurity. This shit has got to get done. Right? Where before, if I had some latitude, I might procrastinate.
You can put it off. I'll do the book next year. I'll do the show. I'll do the whatever.
Whatever. It's like, this has got to get done. And in terms of me communicating, becoming a better communicator with Cynthia, that's improved greatly. We do these check-ins in the morning because before I would get up and I was just like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, got to do that. And I was not checking in
very practical
at all, right? Which is not what a woman needs. So now in the mornings, we do emotional check-in. First thing, how are you feeling? How I'm feeling. We do a meditation. Then we talk about whatever tasks need to get done. Yeah, that's been good. That's been good.
Did you make the realization that needed to happen?
Yes.
Or did she bring it to your attention?
No. So I was talking to someone who was talking about the difference between men and women.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not providing that. I'm just feeling like, wait, we got to do this, got to do that.
Yeah. And I'm in fix-it mode.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we kind of do that, I'm still not completely comfortable with, sharing my feelings, as most men are. But I realize the importance of being able to do that, especially first thing in the morning. And, I don't get all floored and spend 20 minutes going, I'm feeling this and I feel all this existential angst and blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of like, this is kind of what's going on. But it's
it
better
sounds
than
like
I was
you're being
before.
present. Yeah, you're being present enough to go, here's where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to listen to her talk about, her feelings.
Yeah.
Which, if they're, the first word is pronounced, but that doesn't seem the right word. But they're significant. There's a word for it. It's eluding me. And being comfortable with someone else's being in that space, especially when they're coming from pain and discomfort, and being able to just sit and just listen. Right? It's just like, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to fix it. I just need to listen.
No, you just have to be with it.
That's it.
My therapist is doing this thing with me where I know it's uncomfortable. I know you're in pain. I know you want to, it's that lizard brain fight or flight, but you've got to sit with it, whatever it is, because when you sit with it, you realize that it can't kill you. It can't hurt you. It'll pass.
Yeah.
But you have to sit with it. And that's a tough one.
Yeah. But it's been, amazingly good for our relationship because the communication, has improved a lot. And,
good.
Because we had a big fight like 3 or 4 days in, because there was just a lot of tension and stuff in the air. But part of it was just like the communication wasn't there. And, we were both processing what was happening in very different ways. And
not seeing the way the other was processing it, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And not understanding why and, making assumptions about why the other person was acting the way that they were and all this other stuff. So now it's kind of like, okay, I understand. She has a better understanding of why I'm reacting the way that I am so that she can just give me my space. I had an issue Saturday. And I was just like really pissed at myself for having made a mistake. And she was able to she was trying to be there for me. And it was like, there's nothing you can do right now. I just need to process it. And she had the wherewithal to be able to say, I'm going to leave for a while.
Yeah.
And I'll see you in a couple hours.
I'm going to leave you to it. Good luck.
And when I saw her again, I was fine. But for me, it's like, there's nobody who could say anything to me when I'm in that place.
Yeah.
And I just have to be left alone.
I know that place.
I know the logic of the fact that I'm being I'm punishing myself for an unreasonable expectation. And in my head, I know it. But because it's a mistake I've made before, I'm going, why do I keep doing that? And I know, part of it is my ADHD. That was really key. It was this is how stupid it was, right? Because my ADHD, I have to write everything down, right, including times and dates for appointments and schedules and things like that. I had put this thing down for a particular time and date. I arrived there 3 hours early because I put down a tentative time, but had not confirmed, before. That, it starts at 1 o'clock, not 10 o'clock, right? And this is drive out to Santa Ana, right? And, hey, I'm early, 3 hours early, big deal. But that mistake of not putting down the right time has burned me, I either forget the date completely and an important event is happening and I'm rushing, or someone's calling me, asking me, where are you? And I'm like, oh, crap. Right? So that baggage of
whenever it happens again, it calls up all the other stuff around it.
Right.
Doesn't it?
And it's like, I know I need to write this. I mean, anything, it's like, I need to put it down immediately. Immediately. And 9 times out of 10, I'm doing that, man. But the one time you don't do it and something like that happens.
That's when it bites you. Yeah.
I mean, now I think about it, man, I was just early. I was way early.
But you don't, you that's not the way you see it in the moment.
No.
In the moment, it's magnifying every other time that it's happened, exactly. And you're like, I've done it again.
Yeah,
I did it again.
Yeah,
been there.
So it's funny, if I screw something up on the show where it's like something happened, I am not I don't get as upset as I did about that, because some of the stuff is just out of my control. It's something happened with the software or something. I was like, oh, that sucks, right? But it wasn't.
So you beat yourself up because you could have controlled this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know better, and I know that I'm at risk.
But you're human, man. You're human.
Yes.
It's okay.
But yeah. And we've been laughing a lot since this happened, because surprisingly enough, the day that the fire happened, we were going to get our ducts cleaned at the house.
Oh, no.
And we said, we saved ourselves $1,100.
Yeah. It's going to cost us hundreds of thousands, but we saved $1,100.
There was a whole list of house improvements that we were supposed to do. We had just paid for a new AC unit in the summer.
Oh, no.
Which we were enjoying thoroughly until January 8th.
Hey, at least you didn't do a roof.
Oh, yeah. We had done that a while ago, thank God. But yes, but there were so many things that needed to get done. There was a long list, and we had decided, okay, we're going to have to take care of these things. And we were like, hey, you don't have to take care of any of those things on the list anymore. I was like, oh, yeah. And there's a great relief to that.
Yeah, I bet there is.
Yeah, because there are certain things, like, it's really strange. Some of the doors in the house weren't seated properly. So you always had to kind of like jimmy it sort of close. And for the first couple of weeks in this house, I was acting as if those doors would do the same thing, but they're properly seated. It's like, oh, wow, this is the way a door is supposed to work. I can just
close it and open it like a real door.
It's like, oh,
well, and wow. I would imagine that part of the relief that you're feeling is tied to what you did with the appointment being early. Each one of those things is no longer a chance to screw up. Each one of those things is no longer an opportunity to get the information wrong. So you've sort of preemptively let yourself off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, very true. There was a door to the basement that I was supposed to replace. I had bought the door. It had to be custom cut because it was an odd sized door. It had been in my office for 1.5 years. Never got around to doing it. It may have been very simple, but I was just like, and it was exactly that.
20 minutes.
And it's a solid wood door, and I knew it would be taxing and stuff like that. And I knew it's probably very simple, but now I don't got to worry about it.
You don't have to do it.
Don't have to do it.
Check. Check.
So yeah.
Or you could look at it the other way, and instead of saying that you don't have to do them, you could just say, I've checked them all off the list. Look how great I am.
All done.
Yay me.
Yeah. How you doing? I've been spending all the time talking about me, but
no, this is good. This is it's. You needed to get this out.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I don't know how
my
many
pleasure. We'll get around to me another time.
Yeah, because there was a lot of stuff that we were talking about on your end.
Yeah.
That, last time we talked.
We'll do more stuff. We'll do more stuff.
All right.
I've been on the bench way too long in terms of podcasting, and I miss it tremendously. So I need to figure out what that looks like moving forward and get back in the game.
You're a wonderful voice in the podosphere, so
thank you.
I know a lot of people appreciate it and love you for it. So thank you for doing this with me.
No, my pleasure. Anytime. You know that. Anytime.
Thanks to Jeffrey for his generosity and friendship. It's one of the many gifts of having created this show. And if you're a fan of our work, you can write reviews on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts on, and share a favorite episode on social networks, be it X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And remember to use the hashtag #TheCandidFrame. You can also support us financially via my family's GoFundMe page or Patreon. Links for both will be in the show notes and the website. And if you want to make a one-time donation to the show, you can do so by visiting BuyMeACoffee.com/The Candid Frame. We've relaunched our newsletter using Substack. Sign up today and receive regular updates on all things related to TCF. And if you can't find every episode of the show on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts on, download the Candid Frame app for Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker. And this is Ibarionex, and this is The Candid Frame.